How are collective bargaining agreements enforced in the workplace? In recent days, labor relations have taken center stage as workers and employers navigate the complexities of collective bargaining agreements. The question on many minds is, how are these agreements enforced in the workplace? As employees seek to understand their rights and protections, it is essential to know how these agreements operate. Collective bargaining agreements are contracts negotiated between employers and labor unions representing employees. These contracts outline the terms and conditions of employment for workers covered by the agreement. The enforcement of these agreements is rooted in labor and employment law, making them legally binding for all parties involved. When an employment contract conflicts with a collective bargaining agreement, it is generally invalid unless it is authorized by the agreement or improves conditions for the worker. Rights established in a collective bargaining agreement can only be waived if both parties mutually agree. Most collective bargaining agreements include grievance procedures to address disputes over contract interpretation or violations. If a grievance cannot be resolved between the union and the employer, it often moves to arbitration. An arbitrator's decision is typically final and binding, providing a clear enforcement mechanism. In some areas, arbitrators may even impose a collective bargaining agreement on an employer if negotiations fail. In the United States, the National Labor Relations Board oversees the enforcement of federal labor laws related to collective bargaining. This board can intervene when employers refuse to negotiate in good faith or violate collective bargaining agreements. However, enforcement can be limited, as penalties for violations often involve back pay or orders to negotiate rather than stronger sanctions. Some states are actively seeking to enhance their role in enforcing labor laws and collective bargaining agreements. For instance, New York has proposed legislation that would grant state agencies enforcement powers traditionally held by the National Labor Relations Board. This could increase oversight and enforcement of collective bargaining agreements within the state. Judicial review may also come into play when there are disputes over the interpretation or application of collective bargaining agreements. Courts can enforce arbitration awards or handle lawsuits related to contract breaches. However, courts usually defer to arbitration outcomes unless there is a procedural defect or violation of public policy. In summary, the enforcement of collective bargaining agreements relies on a mix of grievance and arbitration processes, oversight by labor relations agencies, and judicial enforcement when necessary. These mechanisms provide structured means to uphold collective bargaining agreements, though practical enforcement can face challenges such as delays and evolving regulatory roles.